Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webcast, Best Practices for Ransomware Preparedness and Recovery, sponsored by NewCloud Networks and Veeam Software. I'm Tracy Cook with Redmond Magazine, and I'd like to thank you all for joining us today. Before we begin, I'd like to take care of a few housekeeping details. Please feel free to type your questions into the Ask a Question box on the console at any time during the presentation. We'll address as many of your questions as we can during the live event, and the entire webcast is being recorded and will be archived for future viewing, and we'll send you an email when the replay is available, and that should be in about 24 to 48 hours. And now I'd like to introduce our speakers. Joining us today is Brandon McCoy, Cloud Engineer at Veeam Software, and Sydney Dietrich, Marketing Manager at NewCloud Networks. So I'd like to welcome you both and pass it over to Sydney.
Great. Thanks, Tracy. I appreciate it. To kick things off, I want to really hit home a few of the realities of what companies are facing when it comes to ransomware. So the truth is that we as humans tend to belittle the likelihood of an event occurring. It's just human nature. We hear about ransomware attacks on the news. We never think it'll actually happen to us. But the reality is that ransomware attacks are expected to occur every 14 seconds by the end of 2019. So take a moment to think about those odds. That means a new company is hit every 14 seconds, and it starts to seem a lot more likely that a company like yours could face an attack. Another reality that we see is that while no one industry is excluded, verticals like healthcare and financial services are especially at risk due to the sensitive data that they tend to handle. So hackers know that for these companies, downtime means loss of life. It can mean loss of funds. And they're really likely to get payment quicker to mitigate those things. And in fact, attacks on healthcare companies are expected to quadruple over the next year. So what this all boils down to is really that the most critical realization is that this isn't stopping anytime soon. So since 2016, variations of ransomware have grown by more than 700%. This means that when we think we cover one vulnerability, another one pops up. So cybercriminals are working fast, and they're constantly developing new ways to attack our businesses. So essentially, you can no longer afford to be unprepared. And as we like to say, it's not a question of if you will be hit by an attack, it's a question of when. So what happens when we face an attack? What are the costs? There's always the monetary costs associated with an attack, loss of revenue due to downtime, customer attrition, retribution to affected parties, etc. But there are also the non-monetary costs that we don't always think about, like damage to reputation. So essentially, IDG tells us that this will all boil down to about $6 trillion in damages annually by 2021. So we don't want your company to become a part of this statistic. We want to help you prepare in order to minimize these costs as much as possible. So on that note, I'd like to pass it over to Brandon McCoy with Veeam Software to go into more detail about what ransomware is and how we might mitigate against it.
Thank you, Sydney. This is Brandon, and I appreciate everyone for joining today to learn a little more about ransomware and how Veeam and NewCloud can help you mitigate those risks. So let's talk about ransomware, the big picture, what it is. Most of you have been in the industry, probably have heard of ransomware. It's nothing new. But let's really boil down into what ransomware is. Ransomware is a type of malicious software. Usually this software is spread via cryptovirology, and it holds your data for ransom, assuming that that data is sensitive, that data is important, and more likely that you will pay for that data for some kind of Bitcoin or other currency. Now, you may think that your business is not at risk. You're not one of these big banks or multi-billion-dollar companies, but actually everyone, every sector and vertical is at risk, so even mom and pop shops. And normally what we see is these cyber criminals will target different businesses, and they will adjust their Bitcoin ransom based on the type of business and how much money they think they're willing to pay. If we look at some of the most common infection approaches, we start with Trojans, which is the number one. This is usually some sort of email attachment or some download that you click on. Next thing you know, it's infected inside of your computer, and this may spread to other computers on a network. We also see removable media. So there was actually a very interesting study done by Google and a few college universities where they dropped a bait USB plug to see who would pick it up and actually put it in their computer to find out what's inside that USB stick. And in this study, curiosity killed the cat. Almost half of the people that found this bait USB did plug it in just to see what it was all about. We also have malvertising. So maybe you're online, you're doing a little shopping or just Googling, and you see an ad pop up that you need to update some Adobe, or that maybe you just want a vacation to an all-paid cruise. You click on it, next thing you know, your computer is infected. We also see social media and SMS. So maybe you get a LinkedIn request or a text message or some sort of other, online communication from someone it seems like you know, or something legit, but it's not. Most importantly, we see in 2019 ransomware as a service. So this is no longer some kids in a basement trying to freeze your computer. This is vast organizations and enterprises that have complete customer call centers and everything ready to take your credit card or Bitcoin payment to get your data back. So now you don't really have to know how to be a cyber criminal. You can use a third-party service and do this, which is pretty crazy. You also may think that you're okay because you're using Linux or Mac or some less commonly used application, but really all systems are vulnerable. Windows, Linux, Mac, right? There are ransomware strains out there for everything, different antivirus softwares, right? So we have to be protected against all of those. So hopefully I didn't scare you too much. Don't worry, there is hope. And it's better to be proactive than reactive. So let's start with how to prepare against ransomware. There's a few common, easy to deploy steps here. The number one thing is keeping all your software up to date. So I'm sure all of you, like myself, have been guilty of being on your computer. Something pops up that you need to, update to the latest and greatest. And instead of saying do it now, you say remind me later, remind me later. Probably shouldn't do that. Probably should go ahead and take that few minutes to update the software to its most up-to-date patch. Number two is performing a threat analysis with your security team. I've done some research. I know a lot of companies, big companies such as Netflix, they'll actually hire people to try and monkey wrench their system and try to break into their software and find vulnerabilities, right? So number three is training staff on cybersecurity practices. I know we here at Veeam do that very often. I'm sure NewCloud does as well. Training your employees, maybe sending an email, a phishing email, to see if they click on it. If they do, maybe just give them a little extra training to let them know that you need to be careful about what you click on and what you open. Number 4 and 5, these are my favorite. Back up all your information every day, right? How critical is that information, and how comfortable are you with the window of time between backups, right? If you lose the data between those backups, right? And then backing up all your information to a secure offsite location, such as NewCloud Networks, is a great way to put your eggs in different baskets. You have a backup on site, that's great, but what if that backup repository goes down, right? What if the whole machine goes down? What if your data center has a power outage or some sort of natural disaster? It's always good to have a second copy at an offsite location, and we'll dive into that a little more later. So we're following these steps. We think we're protected, but how do we know we're protected? Well, Veeam ONE is a powerful monitoring and reporting tool that you can purchase, which allows you to have very detailed reports for auditing, compliance, C-level sign-offs, things like that. We look here from the left. We see our production environment. It gets hit with some ransomware. Oops. My apologies there. Sorry, I'm having some trouble with the animations here. But knowing you're protected with these Veeam ONE reports, so maybe you have a number of VMs that have to be backed up in 2 locations, or you have some SLAs that say these reports have to be backed up every day for 30 days, you can get those reports, right? You can get all kinds of reports on your storage, on your backups, and just making sure that you're protected to whatever SLAs. So now I want to talk about the 3-2-1 rule. In this slide here, we see 3-2-1-1-0, but basically it boils down to 3 copies of your data on 2 different medias, and having one of those off-site or maybe even offline will lead to 0 errors. So what are your 3 copies of the data? It's your production data, it's a local copy of your backup on some sort of disk, and then it's an off-site copy in NewCloud Networks, or maybe even some sort of tape device. That way you're protected. and no errors after backup recoverability verification. So on the topic of 321, Veeam has a feature called the backup copy job. And it's very simple, and it's exactly what it sounds like. It's a copy of a backup. So here we see a local backup, and then we see an offsite backup, or even another backup at your location, just on a different repository. We take a backup. The first backup is going to be that full backup. We're going to send that to that secondary repository. And then from there on, we'll just do the incremental changes. Now again, having a secondary backup at the same location, it's a little safer, but it's not completely safe. It's better to have a cloud backup. So maybe using NewCloud networks, we'll send that full backup. Hopefully that's how fast the backup would actually get there. That'd be nice, right? And then we can send the incremental changes from there. We can also do grandfather, father, son. If you're familiar with this term, it's just basically consolidating your backups. So maybe you do hourly backups, and then those hourlies get consolidated into the dailies, the weeklies, the monthlies, and you save a little storage space, and you keep that same kind of long-term archive if needed. Now, Cloud Connect for backups is included in our software, and it's what NewCloud offers. It's the NewCloud Veeam solution. So Cloud Connect, again, is part of a feature in the software which allows tenants to back up to NewCloud networks over a tunnel without the need for a VPN. This is a secure tunnel created, and then NewCloud is going to allocate some storage space for you so that you're able to send your backups there securely and get them when needed. Now, you can send the backups directly to the cloud. However, as you see this little red line warning us, that is not a 321 best practice rule. So it's more important to do a local backup and then have an offsite backup so that you have two copies. Now, backups are great. They're low overhead. It's a compacted file. We've kind of crunched everything down, saved you a lot of space, and it's just sitting on a disk. That's all it needs is a disk and a Windows machine running it, right? But sometimes you have very low RTOs, and that's called recovery time objectives. So imagine a company who has a web server that takes credit card payments. You want to buy some fancy... My apologies there, guys. Imagine that a company has a web server that takes credit card payments, and you go to buy some fancy new shoes or something like that, and the website goes down because the web server goes down. So what do? You go to another website, and you buy the shoes there. So that company has lost money. So with Cloud Connect replication, we're able to have those VMs up and running very quickly. Excuse me one second, guys. I apologize. Sorry about that, guys. My apologies there. Little interruption. So Cloud Connect replication, like I was saying, is a great way to be able to restore very quickly. What NewCloud can offer for you is a production data store. So unlike a backup where everything is sitting on a disk, you instead have a production data store. VMware or Hyper-V will take those VMs and we'll do a one-to-one copy to NewCloud networks. And those VMs are just in a powered-off state, and you can turn those on at any time as needed. We have some additional options. You see in the middle this WAN acceleration. This is going to allow you to get your replicas there a little faster if you don't have the best bandwidth. So let's talk about some best practices. A couple more data protection tips. So rotating drives are great, right? Maybe you want to take out those drives every night and send them home. We do support that if you want to, plug in some USBs or some external drives, back them up, and then take them offline. This is maybe common sense, but it's a great way to secure yourself even more. Strong user passwords, different user passwords, right? Your Windows machines, your Veeam server, don't attach your Veeam server to the domain. Use local service accounts, different passwords on your repositories, etc. Use mixed repositories as well. So maybe a Windows repository and a Linux repository. I've never seen a virus strain that was bilingual before, so I would assume that having mixed repositories can definitely help you there. VLAN segmentation. So we have a lot of viruses and ransomware strains that traverse the network. They come in through Active Directory, through DHCP attack, and then they find out the IP addresses and the user credentials for the whole network, and they start to spread. So having different VLAN segmentations in your environment and different subnets can kind of quarantine and control those. Then, of course, we have air gap. So, not everybody's a fan of tape. Tape's a little old school, right? It's not the best for restoration. It takes time. It's a little clunky. But honestly, offline storage is the single most effective ransomware resiliency technique. So far, these cyber hackers haven't found a way to put a virus onto a computer that's not online, right? At least not yet. So who knows? Okay, so we've been proactive. We've done everything we can to prevent ourselves from a ransomware attack, but you never know. There's always that chance that something's going to happen, something's going to slip through. So now we have to be reactive. What happens if ransomware does hit? What can Veeam and NewCloud do to help you? Well, without Veeam and NewCloud, you have three options. And I'm going to be honest with you, they're not the greatest. The first one is to pay these cyber attackers, right? Pay them Bitcoin. Now, back in the day when Bitcoin was very new, there was only a few of them out there. So if you got hit with, X, Y, or Z, everybody knew the name of that ransomware. So it was in the cyber attacker's best interest to pay that ransom so that if another person was hit by that, they would know that, hey, these guys are probably going to pay me back. Nowadays, as ransomware as a service spreads and it's all over the country, you have no idea whether you're going to get your money back. They're going to set up shop. They're going to hit you with ransomware. You pay the Bitcoin. They really have no reason to pay you back. They're probably just going to move on to the next one. Now, your second option is to restore data, but it can be compromised as well. What if that was a zero-day virus? What if you got hit with ransomware and it didn't unload for, 20 days? So now you're doing a restore, and that data is compromised as well. Now, there are some options that Veeam has to make sure that you're not restoring an infected backup, and we'll talk about that in a moment. Now, your last option here is to call the feds. Contact your local crime prevention fraud field office. Now, I'm going to be honest with you guys. If you think the FBI is going to be able to get your data back, probably not going to happen with their workloads. Their things are all over the country. They set up shop, and they're gone before a blink of an eye. So, they can maybe help catch the criminals eventually, but your data is probably going to be lost in the wind. But don't worry, Veeam can help, NewCloud as well. So first of all, we talk about how do we know that we have a good copy of a backup. So let's say ransomware hits and it affects our production environment. It locks down all these VMs on the left here. It locks down your repository with your backups, and it's asking for Bitcoin, right? Now, you may have this offline media here, this tape. If you do, probably good, right? But if you don't have tape, like most of us, you're going to have to rely on your backups. Now, before you click that restore button, maybe what you want to do is use our on-demand sandbox. This is going to allow you to take a backup and restore it in an isolated environment. Now, Veeam is on their 9.5 update 4. One of the really cool features that just came out is the ability to do an antivirus scan in a quarantined environment on that backup before you restore it, and then choose what option you want. You can restore it and try to fix the problem, maybe flush out that virus, or abort the operation and go back even further. Maybe use that backup that you sent to NewCloud in order to restore that data. All right, so you also have some additional options. You can restore the whole VM or just the section that was infected. So when we restore that VM, we can restore specific applications, files, data, right? Maybe there's information that you need on there. For instance, maybe you get hit with a SQL attack, a ransomware attack on your SQL server. You need that SQL data. The VM is infected, but maybe some of the SQL database was unharmed. You could restore that SQL data to another machine. Okay. We can also, restore to or from some of our SAN vendors. We integrate with a lot of SAN vendors, HPE, Nimble, NetApp, in order to do restores from storage snapshots as well. Okay, of course, that offline media, that tape device, it's a common theme, keeps coming up because tape is very effective and safe. Just not always the best for fast restores, but it's always great for an offline option. Okay, and then of course, Veeam Cloud Connect with NewCloud. that is the best option, right? Sending your backups off-site to another data center, right? What's better than having your backups in two locations with two different networks, two different data centers, completely isolated? Now, we've been talking a lot about virtualization, right? Most of this is VMware Hyper-V, but there's plenty of shops that have physical machines, right? Standalone physical machines, or maybe even public workloads in Azure, AWS. And so for that, we have the Veeam agent for both Linux and Windows to protect your physical machines. This is kind of what it looks like in the GUI, and it has the same great options as we do with backing up virtual machines. So I hope that was a lot of great information for you guys, and with that, I'm going to pass it back to you. Thanks, everyone.
Great. Thanks, Brandon. Really appreciate it. So one of the key takeaways here that we want to get across is that NewCloud works really closely with Veeam to offer your company total ransomware protection. And we do this by combining Veeam software with our ultra-low latency network of cloud hubs. And this allows you to create secure, encrypted, and automated backups of your data while getting them off-site quickly and pulling them back when you actually need them. And with Replication, you can get really granular with your restore options. You can isolate compromised files and recover the rest of your data without having to worry about bringing a virus into your environment. So I want to take a step back quickly and just give you some context as to who NewCloud is. I'm betting most of you haven't heard of us, and if you have, that's amazing. You may have also heard of Veeam software as well. But for those of you who may be unfamiliar with us, we're a cloud service provider. We've been in business since 1988. Obviously, we weren't a cloud provider back then or called NewCloud. That would have been some great foresight on our part. But our background is in networking, and we've evolved several times over the years to adjust our offerings according to the changes in technology. And as such, we've amassed over 1,000 customers in the U.S. And in Europe. We're a platinum level Veeam partner, and we're one of the first partners to launch Cloud Connect with Veeam. So we've built a reputation for quality within our industry, and our SLA and customer satisfaction rating do a really good job of exemplifying that. And this map is a breakdown of our nationwide ultra-low latency cloud network. Our network is designed and built for backup and disaster recovery. And when we talk about backup and disaster recovery, it's important to have your data far enough away from your main site so that it won't be affected by the same sort of natural disaster, but close enough so that it's usable when you actually need to stand up the VMs. And we actually control the bandwidth and latency between all of these locations, ensuring that our customers' data is always usable. So if your company is hit by ransomware, what this means is that we can get your data back to you quickly. It limits or eliminates downtime. We work really closely with Veeam. I like to say we work hand in glove with them to bring our customers best-in-breed solutions. We have a variety of Veeam offerings that we support. Our engineers are Veeam certified and implement technology very fast. And we offer the full suite of Veeam backup and disaster recovery services. And you can see all the other services we offer here as well. So at NewCloud, we believe that great technology is powered by great people. We're always being asked what sets us apart from the likes of Amazon and Microsoft, and our answer is always the same. We believe in personalized service and not a 1-800 number. So our customers rest assured that we have top engineers available to them 24/7 by 365 to help. And we know that no two companies are the same, so we don't believe in cookie-cutter solutions, and we work really closely with our customers to ensure that we develop solutions that address their core business needs. And we implement those solutions using best-in-breed technology. And we're able to provide them at an affordable price. So the bottom line is that we believe in taking care of our customers. And as part of taking care of our customers, we mentioned earlier that we want to ensure your businesses are protected from the likes of ransomware attacks and other malicious intent. So backup and disaster recovery are only one part of that puzzle. Hackers are constantly poking holes in our defenses, implementing firewalls, antivirus, and intrusion prevention and detection, and email security, to name a few, can significantly reduce the risk. And these solutions can help prevent network intrusions, and if a hacker does get in, they can alert you to intruders immediately. It's important to note that a majority of ransomware attacks and viruses are triggered by human error, mainly by hitting a corrupted link in an email, and that's where email security can make a huge difference. So for emails that might still get through, security awareness training for employees. Brandon mentioned this earlier. It really helps in reducing the likelihood of human error. Veeam and NewCloud, I know both give employees security awareness training, and we're taught to recognize and handle suspicious emails. And I've actually received a few suspicious emails myself. At first glance, they look like they're coming from our president, but when I look at the domain, it's not actually his domain. So the security training actually really helped me avoid certain sticky situations that might have put my company in jeopardy. So it's a great tool to have, and our bundles start at $500 a month. So for $500 a month, it's kind of at that point a no-brainer as to whether or not you should implement some sort of proactive solution to your business. So really quickly, I wanted to run through one of our customer success stories involving a ransomware attack. So this is a company who's a nonprofit out of Denver, and we initially helped them develop a backup and disaster recovery strategy. They didn't have a solution in place. They knew they'd not be able to survive really if any data loss was incurred due to an outage or attack. And actually, a few months after we implemented it, they were hit with ransomware. An employee, of course, clicked on a corrupted link in their email. It took over the computer, spread to the network, encrypted their files, and the hacker demanded a ransom be paid for the encryption key. But fortunately, this customer called us right away, reported the attack. We were able to isolate the infected machine, create a sandbox environment to recover the infected files without paying the ransom, and they were able to restore. So that just kind of goes to show you what proactive solutions can do to help you recover. There was no money paid and no data loss, which was the most ideal outcome. So with that, I want to thank everyone for joining the webinar today. I hope you learned a lot about ransomware and preparedness, and the most important thing to remember is that you're not exempt from attack. The truth is that your company will face something like this in the near future, but proactively preparing can make all the difference. So what's next? You've heard a lot about NewCloud and you've heard about Veeam, and we'd love to talk to you about your unique business needs and understand how we can help you. So we have a free trial available for those of you who are interested in kicking the tires and testing the features of our backup service. You can always reach out to Brandon or myself with any questions you might have after the webinar. And with that, I'm going to throw it over to Tracy to talk about whatever questions came through during the webinar.
Great. Thank you both. Very good presentation, and we do have quite a few questions, so I'll get started. And the first one is, if I have a file server corrupted with ransomware, is my only option to stand up in an NCN data center?
Yeah, this is Brandon. I can take that. So that depends. If you have hardware to restore that machine to, you can definitely do that. But if you have your data backed up at NewCloud Network, or even if your local data needs to be restored there, NewCloud data definitely has options for you to restore. Now, there is the option to restore to a public cloud, but that's kind of, do it yourself on your own, set up the networking, etc. So with NewCloud Networks, they're going to take care of all that for you.
Okay, let's go on to, I've heard that ransomware can affect more than production and also backups. Can NCN and Veeam protect that?
Yeah, so whether it's, infected machine with ransomware, whether it's just some corrupted, the motherboard goes out on a physical machine, your hypervisor is messed up, the fault tolerance of your, VMware clusters or Hyper-V. So we can pretty much restore from any type of disaster, whether it's the data center itself, the hypervisors that run the machine, or the guest applications themselves.
Okay, great. Here's another one. What sort of resources will I require on site to manage the Cloud Connect transition and upkeep?
Great question. I take that one as well. So Veeam is software only. So we're a Microsoft application that gets installed on a Windows 64-bit operating system. So depending on the environment you have, let's say it's a virtualized environment, you can install Veeam on either a standalone physical server or a virtual machine. And it would be best to have some local storage and then offsite to NewCloud Of course, if you don't want to keep your backups locally, you could send them directly to NewCloud. But the Veeam software itself is a very simple, user-friendly GUI where you can set up. NewCloud can help you, set that up as well. All you have to do is really, add a couple credentials. It's a next finished process, and we do all the setup for you. It's pretty simple.
Okay. I'd also like to let the audience know that there's resources in the resource tab. If there's something that you need, if you're not finding the presentation there, just let us know via the console here, and we'll make sure you get it. And then there's a question on whether Veeam Cloud is agnostic.
Yeah, so I don't know if that's a question for both of us, but from a Veeam perspective, we are storage agnostic, and we are hardware agnostic. So the only thing you need to operate Veeam, again, is a Windows 64-bit operating system. And the only thing you need to target for storage is a disk. Any kind of disk will do, whether it's local attached, direct, or SIF share via NAS. Any of those are supported.
Yeah, and from the NewCloud perspective for that question, you can point your backups to an AWS environment that's hosted in a NewCloud data center or a Microsoft environment, or you can host it on NewCloud infrastructure directly. So if you're already in with AWS and Microsoft and you want to host that in a different location, maybe closer to your data centers or closer to your site, we can help you with that as well.
Yep, and just to add to that, Veeam is a availability platform, so we want to be able to offer you availability of your data in any kind of environment, whether that's cloud native like Office 365, on-prem, cloud to cloud. We pretty much work in all solutions.
Very good. Okay, here's another question. Is there a cost to pull down your information in the event of a restore?
Yeah, so from the Veeam perspective,
oh, sorry.
That's okay. Sydney, you want to go ahead and grab that one?
Yeah, no, there's no ingress or ingress bandwidth fees with NewCloud. So we don't charge you for data that's moved across the pipes. The only thing we might charge you for is any sort of managed services that you had that went along with those sort of data push back and forth. So if you were looking to help us help you recover that, or maybe use our engineers to recover for you, there might be a cost with that, but there's no bandwidth fees for pushing data through the pipe from a NewCloud perspective.
Yeah, and just from the Veeam side, that's awesome, because you can definitely use some sort of public cloud offering if you want, and it's no secret. But those ingress egress charges can definitely hit you, right? And it's very, very important that you look and understand the costs of data restorations, ingress egress, if you go that route. So that's really cool.
Okay, very good. We do have a question about the replay, and this event is going to be archived and it will be available for replay. You can access it with the same link you used today, and you will also get an email tomorrow with a link if you want to wait until tomorrow. So thank you. That looks like oh wait, we do have another one here. What are some capabilities to detect intrusion or isolation of a client system due to a ransomware prior to a workstation user's detection and report?
Okay, I'll try to unwind that one a little bit, and please feel free to add a little context if I'm not understanding the question correctly. But Veeam ONE, the monitoring and reporting solution we mentioned earlier, that does have a report called Possible Ransomware Monitoring. What that does is it monitors high CPU utilization and or high read writes on data stores, and you can, kind of determine what equals high, like whatever your threshold is, and that could be a way to lock things down from a proactive response. And then, on the reactive side, again, we do have a way to isolate a backup and verify it with an antivirus scan before we restore it. So hopefully that answers your question. If not, feel free to add a little context there.
Yeah, and I can add to that from a NewCloud perspective. I know that when we talked about how background disaster recovery is just one part of the puzzle, there are other solutions out there to help you be more proactive when you're monitoring your network and your endpoint devices. So intrusion prevention detection is just one of those things where we like to use the analogy of it being kind of like a security system on your house. Your security system will alarm you if there's motion, if there's people that are walking around in the wee hours of the morning, and kind of give you the ability to call the police, which would equivalent to calling NewCloud, or maybe go make sure your door's locked and things like that. So that's really kind of a proactive solution that you can implement on your network. And then from an endpoint device perspective, there's also monitoring solutions there that NewCloud can help with, like managed services to monitor your endpoint devices and make sure that everything is up to date. Because another thing I think we might have mentioned it when we talk about common infection approaches, is that really when your software is out of date, that's when you get a lot more vulnerabilities towards ransomware infection, because there's holes in previous updates if you haven't run patches and updates frequently, that hackers can get in through. So there's definitely other solutions out there, and I know that we mentioned them, and we can address some of those offline if that's of interest to anyone individually. You can feel free to reach out, and we can discuss those as well.
Well, thank you so much, Sydney. I really appreciate your answering, and same with Brandon. Looks like that's about all the time we have for today. However, if you did ask a question, Sydney or Brandon will get back to you offline and provide you with the answer that you're requesting. So again, Sydney, Brandon, thank you so much for an excellent webcast and Q&A. We really appreciate your time and effort today. And I'd also like to thank the audience for attending today's webcast. The webcast was sponsored by NewCloud Networks and Veeam Software and presented by Redmond Magazine. So everyone, thank you so much for attending, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Yep, bye-bye, everyone. Thank you.